We want to thank you for being with us this weekend. If you're watching online, thanks for tuning in. This is Oksana, my name is Scott, and you are you, and we're glad that you're here with us. And if you happen to be a guest with us, joining us for one of the first times, we just want to say thank you. We know it's always a little daunting going anywhere for the first time, so thanks for spending some time with us this weekend. Hopefully, when you came in, we handed you one of these programs. So if y'all got a program, you could pull this out. Lots of stuff in there this weekend. You could spend some time a little bit later on just reading through all the things that we've got coming up. But the place that we'd love to have you start with is if you open up your program just like this, you'll find there's this flap there. It's kind of begging to be torn off, I think. So if you want to fold it over, you could do that. It easily is terrible. It's all perforated and ready to go. That's called our Connect card, and we would love just to invite everybody to spend a moment working on that Connect card. Again, if you're a guest, we'd love a chance just to follow up with you, to thank you for coming, and so you can share as much or as little information as you feel comfortable sharing. If you have questions about TERRANOVA or kind of what we do and why we do it, you can check some boxes or indicate those on the back. A lot of people like to share how we can just kind of support or pray for them or with them. And so whatever it is, we would love to hear from everybody, again, especially if it happens to be one of your first times. And so love to invite you to spend a moment working on that Connect card right now.
And as you're looking through the program, one of the things you will see mentioned quite a few times is Easter. And That's because Easter is 3 weekends away, which I cannot wrap my head around. I don't know where time has gone. But we are so excited for Easter weekend. We are going to have our Good Friday experience, which is a tradition around here every year. And then we're going to have 5 Easter celebrations that weekend. We'll start on Saturday, April 8th with 2 services, one at 3:30, one at 5, and then we will have 3 on Sunday at 9, 10:30, and 12.
Yeah, so Oksana may have just blown your mind by mentioning Easter is just 3 weeks away. But if you are a planner, then you're going to the spot where you're going, okay, so if those are my 5 options, which service am I coming to? If you're that way, I am that way as well. I'll be here actually all of them, but you're probably trying to figure it out. And I would say come to the service that works best for the people that you're bringing with you. Because Easter is one of those times during the year where people just have a greater willingness or openness to say, sure, I'll come to a service, I'll come to a church service, and maybe I don't normally do that, but they'll give it a try. And so love just to encourage us to be thinking about the people that we want to bring with us. And as you're doing that, you're thinking of those people, if you know anybody who's got little ones, they've got kids, then I would encourage you, invite them to come out Saturday, because Saturday at 2 o'clock, we've got our annual Easter egg hunt, and our Supernova Kids team always does a great job with this. But this year, as I've been hearing them talking and planning about it, I'm just going, wow, this is going to be better than ever before because of the things that are happening. And so the egg hunt is taking place Saturday, April 8th at 2 o'clock, which means that the 3:30 service that's right after this egg hunt might be perfect for those people that we know. We go, hey, that's a young family. They've got little ones. They could do the egg hunt, take a picture, come to service right after. And so that might be the place where you love just to invite them to come and join you with. And so as I'm talking about invitation, you'll see that on your chairs, we've got these invite cards. And so we've got plenty of those around. We've also got some of them that are out on the table in the lobby. So I'd love just to invite you to take one of those invitation cards, stick it with you. Bring that, put that in your purse, put it by your front door, wherever you're going to be interacting with some of the friends that you're going to be inviting this year. You can take that invitation card and place it there. Like I mentioned, we've got plenty out on the table in the lobby. And in case you're going, okay, an invitation card's really good, but I want to take it up another level. Well, I'm glad you asked, because we've actually got some Easter yard signs that are available out in the lobby as well. Some of you already have yard signs. Others are like, how did you get that? But yeah, we've got Easter yard signs out there. And so if you want to put those out for the next few weeks, you can see we've got a few out there that you can grab, place it out there, and just kind of be inviting the people around you to join and celebrate Easter this year at TERRANOVA.
Well, hopefully you can tell we're really excited about Easter. We're excited to get to celebrate it together. We're also really excited to make Easter gatherings here a really great opportunity for all of the loved ones that we all might invite, our friends, our family members, our neighbors. And one way that we can make sure Easter is a great weekend for everyone is by having really awesome teams that are serving. So if you could take a moment and look at this yellow flyer that you have in your program, one side says Easter at TERRANOVA, so you'll see join the Easter celebration team. This gives all of us some ways that we can jump in to help make it a great environment for everyone. You can jump in on a guest service team, which means you would greet people and hand out programs. You can jump into a kid's classroom to make that a great experience. You can commit to praying for the services, which all of that is really impactful as well. So take a moment at some point today to read through this flyer, check the boxes that apply to you, write your information at the bottom, and then hold on to it. We'll let you know how you can turn it in at the end of the gathering tonight.
Yeah, so absolutely. Easter is coming up. It's just 3 weeks away. We can't wait to celebrate with us all together, as well as the people that we're going to be inviting just to be with us. But today, we're actually going to be continuing a series called Investigating Jesus. It's a series that we've been in the last few weeks, and it's based off of one of the biographical accounts of Jesus' life. It's written by a man named Luke, and in fact, the title of this series, Investigating Jesus, it's taken from some of the opening words that Luke writes as he introduces his account of Jesus' life. And as he's writing to a guy named Theophilus, somebody who's apparently begun to follow Jesus, who's new in his journey and is taking next steps.
Mm-hmm. Now, Luke himself actually wasn't one of the original followers of Jesus. He actually wasn't even Jewish. Luke was somebody that came to follow Jesus as the movement was spreading. Luke was a doctor, and he was highly educated, and he actually would come to be known as a really accurate historian. And so he is, even in his account, explaining his reason and his process for putting this account together for us. And so we're going to take a look at the very beginning of that passage that tells us what he did. So many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things that you have been taught. And so, again, Luke, as a historian, is explaining his reason and his process, which other historians at the time would have done as well. And what he wants us to understand is that, okay, we've heard these stories and we've been taught these certain things, but he wants us to see the whole story, the big picture, and to have this history so that anyone who heard this could know the accurate facts and be confident that this was true.
I love that. So previously on Investigating Jesus, after being thrown into the spotlight, Jesus is baptized. John the Baptizer makes him widely known to everybody around him, and Jesus begins traveling. He's traveling into the towns and cities and villages of northern Israel. It's an area called Galilee. And what Jesus is doing is one of two major things. The first thing that everybody's come to see is Jesus is healing people. Right? And so in doing so, Jesus is quite literally giving people their lives back. I mean, these are people who are not able to work, and now they can. They're people who are social outcasts, but now they're able to interact with people. They're getting their families back. They're getting so much back. And they're in a world where good healthcare is not readily available. So people are going, okay, I want in on that. They're trying to come to get a piece of Jesus. But in addition to that, Jesus is also teaching. And he's teaching in a way that they've never heard before. And these teachings are they're like crazy to the people that are hearing them. They're going, we've never looked at life this way. It seems like this upside down way of looking at the world, when in fact it might be the exact way that life was intended to be looked at all along.
Mm-hmm. So this is what Jesus was doing. He was setting everything right side up again. And Jesus talks about this over and over again, that he's coming to bring the good news to the poor, to those who are held captive, to sinners, to the outsiders, to people who never felt like they would ever belong. And he is talking about this kingdom that is actually highly relational and it's inclusive. And this kingdom of God actually wasn't meant to have any borders. Literally everyone was invited to be a part of it. And as you can imagine, for some people, this was extremely exciting. This was the best news ever. But then for other people, this actually seemed quite dangerous and threatening and offensive even.
Yeah, so as we left off last week, Jesus has resolutely set out for Jerusalem. And it's in Jerusalem where he knows that he's going to be killed, that he's going to lay down his life. And the rest of Luke's account Well, it's written as they are taking place on this journey. It's under this cloud that we, the readers, are able to see this looming sense of his destiny.
And Luke keeps repeating this phrase, while they were on their way.
Yeah.
While they were on their way, Jesus was teaching them. He was telling these stories that were so fascinating and then sometimes a little bit unsettling. And now a lot of those stories are even famous. But all of this was happening as they were traveling together. They were on a journey. They were actually moving down the road together. It's almost as Luke is portraying that following Jesus is a journey. And it's something that we learn as we're going. And this is where we pick up today with part 6 of Investigating Jesus.
So as Jesus journeys towards Jerusalem where he's going to be killed, and as his fan base and the fanfare grows, and as his followers argue about who's going to get the bigger slice of the pie once they get there, he develops what many would have considered a really unlikely group of enemies. Conservative, well-meaning, devout, scripture-reading, rule-following religious people. These men, and they were known in their world as Pharisees, these are actually the ones that everybody would have expected to have embraced the life and the way of Jesus, like the what he was about. They believed the Hebrew scriptures. They took them seriously, the law and the prophets. They believed expectantly the coming of God's deliverer, the Messiah, and they were very strict in their obedience to all that God had said, the religious law. In fact, they were so sincere and so strict in their obedience to the rules, they actually added more rules. Like a lot more rules, hundreds and hundreds of additional rules to clarify what the original rules had meant and how to obey them, from Sabbath to dietary laws and eating kosher to keeping your oaths. Like, exactly what does that mean? We've got 10 more rules for that. And often they added rules to intensify God's instructions, adding rules to the rules to build a fence around the rules, so with more rules to make sure you don't accidentally break the rules. So there's a lot of rules, and this was especially true with a whole section of guidelines from Torah or God's law that applied to something we might call ritual purity. And what they had done is they had taken a number of the rules that only applied to priests. Rules that only applied to priests, and only applied to priests when they were in the temple for a really good reason, all about cleanliness and purity in that special context. And then they intensified those, they amplified those, and they applied them to everybody in ordinary life, remaining clean and undefiled all day long, everywhere, staying away from things and people who might be contaminated. And since you can't always stay away, washing their hands regularly to like remain pure, just like the priests had done. And this was all true, especially at mealtime. Eating meals in a state of purity was particularly important to the Pharisees. So all the food items had to have been properly tithed. Have you given 10% of that salt and that pepper to God before you put it on the meat? I mean, every item properly tithed, hands had to be properly washed. And of course, the people that you're eating with, they all had to be uncontaminated as well. Now, to be clear, they were very well-meaning, and in their minds, they were very God-honoring, but Jesus saw their focus on the external and the vertical as coming at the expense of the internal and the horizontal. The external conformity with rules to make sure that I'm okay with God and God's okay with me. Vertical religion, external conformity would always, always come at the expense of internal, like what's happening inside me, where my heart's at, what I want and what I allow to go on inside me, and the horizontal, how I'm actually treating all of the people around me whom God loves, including all of those contaminated people that I don't even want to touch. And for Jesus, this was all messed up. This was all backwards, and it was all upside down, and as well-meaning as they might have been, for Jesus, their form of religion had turned, well, it turned what you call something that's been sitting in the refrigerator too long, and you open up that Tupperware and it's like, whoo, I think this has gone bad. It's gone sour, it's gone bad, it's become toxic. The irony is Jesus looks at their form of religion as contaminated and defiled and contaminating and defiling other people. And so as Luke is writing his account of Jesus' life, all of this comes to a head, not surprisingly, at a dinner table while Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. There's a conversation that just exposes everything that's bad about religion gone wrong, feeding pride, abusing influence, hiding behind the superficial. But there's something that happens at the end of this scene. At the very end of it, where Jesus says something about this tendency that religion actually has, and it's so powerful, it's so true, and it's so relevant that every single one of us needs to sit up and pay attention. Here's what he says at the very end of the scene. He says this, "Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy." Now, you know what yeast is? Well, in their world, yeast referred to like leaven. It was like starter, like sourdough starter or something, where you put a little bit of that into the dough, and then it creates a chemical reaction where it's like unseen to the naked eye. You can't watch it, but just a little bit actually affects and infects the entire whole. And Jesus says, hypocrisy is just like that. Bad religion is just like that. It only takes a small amount. It only takes a small dose of the wrong thing to corrupt the whole thing. Just a little bit of the wrong thing, just a little bit of hypocrisy, just a little bit of bad religion corrupts the whole person, corrupts the whole community, corrupts the whole movement. But what really gets my attention about what Jesus says at the end are the first 4 words. And I want us to read these out loud together, these words in yellow. Will you read them out loud with me? Let's say these together. Be on your, let's say that again. Be on your guard. Be on your guard. It implies this might sneak up on you. This might sneak you. This is something you're going to have to be mindful of and kind of diligent and alert about, that like yeast, this has a way of spreading in a life, in a community, in a movement, changing the shape of it, changing the chemical makeup of it, and that this might actually happen to me without me seeing it, without me even knowing it's happened. I need to be on my guard against this, which raises a question. How would I know if I've been affected by this? How would I know if this has a way of sneaking up on me? How might I be able to see it before it does? So as we unpack this conversation that Jesus has, as we do this, I'm going to give us a series of questions to ask ourselves, to be on our guard about, to reflect on honestly, to diagnose our own tendencies towards us. And then at the very end of tonight, we're actually going to give you something physically to take home with you to remind you to be on your guard. So one day on the way to Jerusalem, Jesus is teaching, and when he finishes speaking, a Pharisee invites him to dinner at his house. And Jesus, never one to pass on a meal, goes into the house and reclines at the table, apparently walking right past the ritual cleaning bowl that is sitting there for all the guests to use to wash their hands. He just reclines right down on the table, and the Pharisee he's a little amazed. He's a little shocked. He's a little taken aback that Jesus didn't first wash before the meal. Now, some of you would be a little shocked as well, right? Some of you moms are like, hey, you guys didn't wash your hands. You go right back in there. But this has nothing to do with whether it's right or wrong to wash your hands before you eat. This has nothing to do with germs or germophobia, except it kind of does. A little different kind of germ, like this spiritual germ, this contagion that might contaminate you, that might pass from someone or something you touched during the day to you as you eat your meal. So you need to wash your hands so you will be pure. And of course, Jesus is fully aware of that. He knows all about their scruples. This is not an oops moment for Jesus. He's doing this intentionally, as he often does. In fact, Jesus does this kind of thing so often, I think a lot of us would mostly feel uncomfortable around Jesus, because he just has a way of like stirring things up, creating teachable moments, elevating the tension of a moment to point out, in this case, the deep, deep flaws with the religious system of his day. And so Jesus says to this Pharisee who's a little shocked, says to him, now, you know, you Pharisees, you clean the outside of the cup and dish. You are like so meticulous about external purity. And on the outside, I mean, you look marvelous. You look fantastic. But inside, your inner world hasn't been transformed. It hasn't been cleansed. Inside, you are full of greed and wickedness, you foolish people. Didn't the one who made the outside make the inside too? In other words, aren't they part of the same thing, one and the same? Can you actually be filthy on the inside and truly clean on the outside? To which they all would have said, well, no, you can't be. But see, this is the problem with religion gone bad. This is the problem with religion gone wrong, because bad religion always focuses on the externals. It tends to focus on the outward, even superficial conformity to certain standards or rules, but does so neglecting true, genuine inner transformation of our hearts and our orientations, what we think about and what we feel in ways that really matter. And listen, conforming is a bad substitute for transforming. Conforming to some external standard or obeying all the rules is a bad substitute for transforming my inner self to such a degree that the outward standards don't even matter anymore, because my heart's orientation is completely right. And by bad substitute, I don't just mean it's an inadequate substitute, which it is. It's very inadequate, but it's worse than inadequate. It's detrimental. It actually has the adverse reaction. It's detrimental to genuine transformation, because as I change things on my outside, I start to think I'm okay. And it masks my need for genuine heart transformation or change. And this is Jesus' point. This is what he's talking about. If your inner world is full of greed, how do you cleanse that? Washing your hands? I don't think so. In fact, Jesus says, I know the detergent for your heart to cleanse your heart of greed. And you know what it is? It's generosity. To be generous to people who have less than you. See, greed is all about me and more for me. I need more. I want more. I want more stuff. I want more attention. I want more perks. I want more honor, more recognition. And who doesn't want more for me, just flowing to me? But generosity is actually more for others. More for others. And here's what Jesus is saying. You begin to want that. You begin to want more for the other person, and you begin to do more for the other person, and you begin to give more for the other person, and that will begin to change you inside. That will begin to change your heart. And then, he says, then you'll really be clean. So, how about us? Could that happen to me? Could I become focused on the outside to the neglect of the inside? Here's a question for us. The question is this: am I more concerned with looking good than being good? Think about that for a second. Am I more concerned with looking good than being good? Let me get specific. If I lose my cool with my kids at the grocery store, and then I look up and I see my neighbor or my boss or my life group standing right there watching me, am I more concerned that I just lost it with my kid, or that all these people just saw me lose it with my kid? Which actually creates more disruption for me? If I have a character flaw, or like an addiction or a deep, deep struggle that is starting to lead to consequences in my life that are now visible? Am I more concerned about my character flaw and my addiction, or that people are starting to find out about that? Which is more troublesome to me? Am I more concerned with looking good than being good? And listen, looking good, trying to look good for others has always been easier and more appealing than actually being good and doing good. It's like yeast. And you need to be on your guard against that, which leads to the second thing Jesus says about bad religion. He says, woe to you Pharisees, because you give God a tenth of your mint and your rue and your garden herbs. Now, this is called tithing. Tithing is actually part of Torah, unlike the hand washing thing. And this act of tithing, this spiritual habit or rhythm or practice, is this idea of giving 10%. That's what a tithe means, giving 10% of everything I have back to God, the annual yield of my crops and my flocks and everything I gain, 10% of that back to God as a way of shaping my heart to be grateful and generous and humble. And the idea is everything comes from God. It's kind of like that song we sang earlier. Everything comes from God. I'm so humble. I'm so grateful that I give this back to God as a way of constantly reminding myself, this regular rhythm. And he says, and so you're doing this, and it's kind of humorous, with garden herbs, which is kind of funny because these are not plants with a significantly high annual yield. Some of you have herb gardens like in your kitchen window, right? How do you give a tenth of that annually? Like you're trimming leaves and like clipping a little bit off there. Is that 10%? Can we weigh that? And it's kind of humorous, but the idea, and they actually did this, the idea is they are meticulous. They are meticulous in their obedience to laws that are external and vertical. And he says, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You lose no sleep over matters of injustice towards powerless people. Or you don't go out of your way to extend mercy to somebody who's in deep pain, to treat other human beings with the love that God, their heavenly Father, actually feels towards them, especially the ones who need it most. In other words, Jesus is saying, you are missing the point. You are missing the point of your spiritual practice, and that's what bad religion does. It always, always misses the point. It misses the point. It hides behind the superficial, and it neglects what's most important. And Jesus says, you've got these spiritual practices, and listen, there's nothing wrong with tithing or giving 10%. That's part of God's law. Even doing that meticulously, he goes on to say, you should actually continue that. You should practice the latter without having the former undone. And here's what Jesus is saying. See, spiritual habits and spiritual practices, they're really important. In fact, I believe they're essential to spiritual change. In fact, we recently did a series. We kicked off the year with a series on habits, talking about how the success of our lives is really built on the strength of our habits. And that really, really is true. But the point of spiritual practices, the point of spiritual habits and rhythms like tithing, giving 10% back to God all the time, or gathering, or worshiping, or praying, or opening up the scriptures and reflecting on the point is never just the external event or experience, or vertical, is God happy with me? Is God okay with me now? The point is always horizontal. It's always the transformation of my inner life such that justice and mercy and goodness and generosity and the love of God is just flowing naturally out of the kind of person that I am becoming. That's the point. And so here's the question. Do I do this? Do I do this? Am I measuring my spiritual health in superficial ways? Am I measuring my spiritual health in superficial ways? When I think about how I'm doing spiritually, my spiritual health, do I evaluate that in terms of externals and like verticals? Like, did I read my Bible enough? Like, did I give enough money? Did I do enough things? Or do I evaluate my spiritual health in terms of the horizontal? In terms of the transformation of my inner life such that justice and the love of God are flowing more naturally and freely out of me. Am I measuring my spiritual life in superficial ways. Jesus goes on, woe to you Pharisees, because, you love the most important seats in the synagogues, their gathering places, and respectful greetings in the marketplace. You love the honor, you love being special, you love the attention, and you seem to act and you seem to feel like you're actually a little bit superior to other people because you're so good at being good. And again, this is what bad religion does. Bad religion always feeds our pride. It feeds our pride instead of kills it. Instead of killing our pride, it feeds us. Instead of making us humble, it actually kind of puffs us up a little bit. And I totally get it. Because you think about it this way. Think about it. It is hard to get good at being good and not feel pretty good about it. It is. It really is. It's hard to get good at being good about anything and not feel, whether that's health or diet or finances or parenting or getting out of debt or doing your job. It's hard to get good at being good about anything and not feel a little better than about it. A little better than the next person. A little bit superior. It's like, do you see what they eat? Do you see what they put in their body? I would never put that in my body because my body is a temple. Did you see how they're parenting their kids? Do you see how they discipline their kids? Oh, we would never do that because it's hard to get good, isn't it? Isn't this true? At anything without feeling maybe a little better than about it. The truth is, pride is a potential problem for anybody who's trying to get better at anything in their lives. But it has no place at all in the spiritual life of a follower of Jesus, because there are no ladders and there is no hierarchy in this movement. There is nobody above me and there is nobody below me. And this is a key indicator. This is a key warning sign of the yeast of hypocrisy. So here's a question for you. Do I sometimes feel a little bit superior to other people because I'm getting something right finally in my life? Does that make me better than people who aren't getting it right or trying as hard? Do I look around ever and just compare myself with other people and maybe feel a little bit above those who aren't trying as hard and maybe a little bit below people who seem to be getting it better than I am? Bad religion feeds this. It feeds pride, and it creates communities that feed pride and ego, and it does not belong in the Jesus movement. It's yeast. Then comes here's what he says next. Oh man, here's what he says next. Woe to you, he says, because you are like unmarked graves, which people walk over without even knowing it. Now, this would be horrifying to a Pharisee, and actually to most people in Jesus' day, because graves and what's called corpse contamination was the highest level of defilement. It was like the worst of touching death in any way left a person unclean for an entire week. Washing your hands won't even get rid of this. It would leave you unclean and defiled for a week. And so they would go out of their ways to mark graves so you didn't accidentally touch one or walk past or walk over one. They would whitewash tombs and graves every spring so that people could avoid accidentally touching one and then becoming unclean. And Jesus takes this vivid picture from their world of defilement and making people dirty. And he says, that's you. You're that. Yeah, that's you. You effortfully avoid touching or associating with anyone or anything that might make you dirty by association, while all the while you're actually making other people dirty by association with you. Whoo! And bad religion does that. Bad religion leaves other people around me worse because of me. Bad religion leaves other people worse. It defiles others. It leaves others dirty. It ripples negatively into my world around me. It's the nature of yeast, or really any contamination or contagion or virus. It just spreads and it affects and it infects without even being noticed. So how about me? Do I do that? I just got to tell you, this question here has been a matter of focused, intense introspection for me for a number of years now. How do I leave people after they cross my path? What are they left with? Or how do I leave people, you might say, in my wake? In my relational, my emotional, my spiritual wake? How do I leave the people that I've touched, that I've interacted with, that I've just passed by after intersecting my life? Are they better? Are they clean? Are they inspired or maybe full of life or light or grace or courage or hope? Or are they left kind of dirty or maybe shameful or regretful, wishing they had never met me, wishing their path had not crossed mine? Are they left, instead of being hopeful, are they left a little less hopeful, a little more hopeless? Or feeling inferior, or less than, or one down, or anxious in any way? How do I leave people in my wake? Do I leave them better, or do I leave people worse? Bad religion always damages other people. It always defiles and contaminates and leaves them worse off than before. And then he goes on, he says, and you experts of the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens that they can hardly carry, and then you won't even lift a finger to actually help them carry it. Now, matter of interest, rabbis and teachers of the law, experts of the law, often use the term of a load or a yoke metaphorically to refer to their teaching, that their teaching was their yoke or their load. And he's playing off of that, and he says, your teaching and your rules, and when you try to explain God to people, it's like it just burdens them. It weighs them down with these heavy expectations that you put on them. And bad religion does that. Bad religion weighs people down. It loads people down with burdens and shame and rules and expectations and obligations. He says your teaching is just full of shoulds and heavy on conviction, and you load people up with burdens and expectations and shoulds, and then you don't come alongside them to get up under that load a little bit, help them carry that and show them how and work with them and give them grace and give them encouragement along the way. You make it hard. Now, some of you are thinking, well, is that so bad? Is that so bad? I mean, isn't it supposed to be hard? I mean, seriously, aren't the expectations really, really high? We're talking about God. This is God. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be heavy. And then there's Jesus, who says, come to me. If you've gotten worn out, and beat up, and tired of religion and life, I'll give you rest. You take my yoke, my teaching upon you. You start to learn from me. I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will have rest for your souls. You will have rest because my yoke is easy. My burden is light. So here's the question. Do I sometimes get tired of trying to be good? Just kind of worn out by the expectations that I feel others or God or I have on myself? Does my approach to God sometimes leave me, or maybe the people around me, feeling like they need a break from God, just to catch their breath maybe? And Jesus would say, well, then you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. Hey, come follow me, because my burden, my yoke, it's light. It's light. It'll set you free. It'll give you rest for your soul. The next one he mentions is a little weird for us, okay? I'll explain it really briefly. He says, woe to you because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your ancestors who killed the prophets. So you testify that you approve of what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs. So here's what's going on. In the distant past, their ancestors, their forefathers and foremothers, had imprisoned and even killed some of the prophets who dared to speak up against the status quo, who dared to challenge the religious and the political powers that be. And as a way of redeeming themselves, this generation, particularly of Pharisees, were building tombs and monuments and such to honor the Pharisees that their forefathers had killed. And the idea, so here's the idea that went behind that. Behind building the tombs and the memorials, that it was a way of assuaging their guilt or relieving their personal guilt or responsibility, kind of made them feel a little more pious. And the unspoken idea, in fact, sometimes the actual spoken idea of doing this went a little like this. If we had lived back then, we wouldn't have killed them. If we had lived back then, unlike our ancestors, we would have listened to them. We would have paid attention. We would have said, yes. The same prophets whose cries for justice and concern for the poor and the outcast and those who are desperately in need are being silenced by them, by their scholarly hair splitting over how much of their spices should be tithed. It's like, you're the same as your fathers. You're actually one and the same. The irony, of course, being that Jesus says this while he's on his way where? To Jerusalem, where what's going to happen? He's going to be killed. But that's the nature of religion gone bad. It leads to self-deception. It leads to self-deception that doing religious things can actually blind us to the reality of our own hypocrisy, our own need for character growth, our own need for change. Doing religious things, bad religion has a way of like hiding us from the truth and soothing our conscience and relieving some of our guilt without realizing that we actually need to change, that we need to grow, that God needs to get a hold of something in our lives. So here's the question. Do I do this? Do I ever do religious things to relieve guilt without actually changing the behavior? Do I do something religious to relieve the guilt of that thing without actually changing from the inside out? Do I ever do something that's like this vertical thing to make sure like, okay, God, I'm okay with you and you're okay with me, right? That actually removes my responsibility to maybe make things right with the person I hurt. So I hurt you, I say I'm sorry to God, and I'm good. Does that ever happen? Do religious people ever do that? Or like I ask forgiveness from God and you, and then I assume like everything should be better. I said I was sorry. I already apologized. I asked you to forgive me. You should forgive me. Do I ever try to relieve the guilt without doing the hard internal work of changing the harmful behavior that I continually do that hurts you and requires me to ask you for your forgiveness? Do I ever try to relieve the guilt without changing the behavior? Doing things to relieve guilt without changing our hearts? That's bad religion. That's religion gone bad. And then he says this, he says, woe to you. Woe to you, experts in the law, because you've taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves haven't entered it, and you've actually stopped the people who are trying to. The key to knowledge here, he's talking to law scholars or Torah scholars, and he's referring to their role of interpreting scripture. Like their role is to actually give people the key to knowledge, but they've taken it away. And it's like they're not entering into the life that God has, but they're also blocking the access for other people who want to connect with God. And this is the last straw. Like finally and ultimately, worst of all, bad religion does this. It actually keeps other people away from God. Bad religion keeps other people out. In other words, there are these people who need God, and they're trying to get to God, but your approach to God actually keeps them away from God, keeps them out, and it keeps you out too. And religion is a lot like that. In fact, religion can be defined this way. Religion always goes like this. There are things you need to believe, and there are ways that you need to behave, and if you believe right enough and behave right enough, then you can belong to the right people. That's religion. If you believe right and you behave right, then you can belong right. And so there are all kinds of people in Jesus' day who needed God, who needed to belong with God. Lepers and tax collectors and sinners and prostitutes and unclean people and unteachable people who steered a very wide path around the Pharisees and the religious leaders because they knew they did not belong with those godly people. Like, I clearly don't believe the right things, and I definitely don't behave the right ways. So I know, unfortunately, what they concluded is, so then I know I don't belong. I know I don't belong. Since I don't belong with them, I must not belong with God. And some of you maybe, or maybe you're watching, some are like, yeah, that happened to me. That happened to me. I was trying to figure some things out. I was trying to take some next steps. But then the church I was going to, like my brother came out, and then we were suddenly personas non grata. We weren't really welcomed there anymore. We didn't belong. My parents got a divorce, and all of a sudden, they didn't kick us out, but it was pretty clear we had done something, and we didn't we didn't belong. And that was it for me. And I figured if I don't belong with them, then I don't want anything to do with the God that they seem to belong to. And once again, Jesus just looks at all of this way of religion that's gone bad. And again, he flips the script. As he's always doing, as he always seems to do, he turns everything around. And the Jesus path goes, hey, just belong. Just belong. Over time, you will believe and you'll behave. We'll work out on it, but just follow me. Just join me. Yeah, I already know you don't believe all the right things. No one who followed Jesus believed all the right things. I'm pretty sure no one still does. I mean, we're still working on, I know you don't believe all the right things. That's okay. Just follow me. You'll figure it out. I know you don't behave in all the right ways, but if you will follow me, and you will slowly begin to change the way you think about life, the things that you believe and the way you see life. And as a result, you'll start to change from the inside out some of the things you do. But it begins with relationship. Just follow. Just join me. And they did. They did in droves. See, the religious leaders had a righteousness that actually pushed people away from God. And Jesus had a righteousness that drew them in. How about me? How about me? How about you? Here's the question for us. Does my life make following Jesus more inviting or less? Think about that. Does my life, does the way I follow Jesus, the way I talk about God, the way I think about God, does it make following him more inviting or less inviting? Does it open the door for others or does it kind of shut the door for others? Does it draw people in or does it kind of push them away? Does it make the Jesus path easier to find or does it obscure it a little bit and make it harder? Bad religion. Bad religion, it focuses on the externals. It always misses the point. It feeds our pride. It leaves other people worse than before in my wake. It weighs people down. It leads to self-deception. And in the end, maybe worst of all, it actually keeps people away from God. And the tragic thing about religion is that a person can actually get better and better and better at religion and worse as a human being. And Jesus says, you need to be on your guard against that. And so Luke tells us that the Pharisees and the experts in the law were triggered by this. They were furious. Jesus goes outside and they begin to oppose him fiercely and to besiege him with questions, just waiting for a chance to catch him in something he might say. Meanwhile, outside the house, Jesus is surrounded by another massive crowd, and he begins to teach his disciples, saying, be on your guard against what we saw in there, against the yeast of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. In other words, bad religion isn't just something that happened to them. It's something that happens to all of us. It's something that can happen to all of us. We are all susceptible. In fact, this isn't just a religious thing. And you think about it, Jesus is putting his finger on religious hypocrisy, but hypocrisy is hypocrisy. And we are all susceptible to everything we just talked about. So we must be on our guard. To help us with this, to be mindful and alert to the danger, we actually want to give you something physical on your way out. These are packets of yeast. So here's what we love to do. Our guest services team are going to have something physical for you to carry into your week and to put somewhere where you'll see or like carry them around in your pocket and you'll feel it every once in a while. And just remember, I need to be on my guard about this. I need to be this can sneak up on me. This yeast, like yeast, it has a way of spreading in a life, in a community, in a movement, changing things, shaping the things, changing the chemical makeup of things. And that could actually happen to me without me knowing it and without me seeing it, even with my best intentions. So we need to be on our guard, and we'll pick it up right there next week as the tensions build in week 7 of investigating Jesus. Let me close this in prayer. As we close in prayer, I just want to read those questions off to you once again. Read them to you again as you have this little moment of quiet. Am I more concerned with looking good than being good? Do I do that? Am I measuring my spiritual health in some superficial ways? Do I sometimes feel superior to other people when I'm doing well? Maybe inferior to them when I'm not? How do I leave people in my wake? Have I been leaving people better or worse this week? Do I sometimes get tired of trying to be good, weighted down and burdened? Do I ever do religious things to relieve my guilt without actually changing my behavior and doing that hard work from the inside out? And does my life make following Jesus more inviting or less? Heavenly Father, we want to be on our guard. I am so conscious of how easily this sneaks up in a life, regardless of our best intentions. So we ask you this week, as we go into this week, this season, this Easter season, that you would give us the self-awareness, the mindfulness, to be alert to ways that this creeps in us, that our life with you would be genuine and healthy and full of your love. And we pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, John, and thank you for joining us here for part 6 of Investigating Jesus. So glad we could be together. As always, there's an opportunity to share what happened tonight by hitting our YouTube page. The link is there, and sending that to someone who you think would enjoy it, benefit from it, be irritated by it. I don't know, but you know somebody that came to your mind as you sat here tonight. Just a reminder that there are some things that you can leave on your way out. The first is that Connect card. I hope you've taken a chance to fill that out. Let us know if we can be praying for you. Our leadership team can pray for you this week, or if there's something going on in your life, we would love to know about it. So that can go in the baskets on your way out. Also, there's an opportunity to give out of what God has given us. Always as on our way out with those baskets, or you can do that also online, and a lot of us do that as well. Just a couple more things to mention. One is we've been talking about this worship night tomorrow night. This was something that wasn't really on the calendar, that we sort of planned in a sort of impromptu way, because we really felt that there's a unique season in the life of our church as we're leading towards Easter, and in this community, and some of the things that we've been doing this year, like the bus stop signs and the yard signs and all the things we've been doing around invitation, one of the things that's been leading towards is Easter. So as Easter approaches, we just felt like that this was a good time to get together in a kind of a unique, focused way to pray together, to worship and sing, and to take communion together. So that's tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. And I've got to tell you two things. One is, if you are there, you will have a good time. I absolutely guarantee it. The second thing is, if you were there, you will get something out of it. So I encourage you to do whatever you have to do, your schedule, to be here tomorrow night at 5 o'clock as we gather and sing and pray and take communion together. And then on your way out, stop by that table, grab an Easter yard sign, grab some invites, and grab a packet of yeast on your way out as well. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week, or we'll see you tomorrow night, actually, right here at TERRANOVA.